You probably heard that John Bolton has written a book, and the White House is upset about that, of course, because there's more revelations of the chaos in the White House. Of course, John Bolton, like most of the people in the White House, including Trump, they're inveterate liars. And I have to really wonder, I'm sorry, I don't mean this to sound conspiratorial, but I really have to wonder, there's Aoife. He's got his little bird be safe collar on. No, we don't like to dress up our cats. I don't mean to sound conspiratorial, but I really have to wonder whether, as we've mentioned before, and as you probably are aware, Trump is not a smooth operator when it comes to dealing with foreign countries or domestically. And according to various people that have worked with him, he has little understanding of the White House, let alone foreign relations. And it wouldn't surprise me if the national security state, because he's not a smooth operator like, say, Obama or somebody like that. He's not a good salesperson for empire, basically. And in some ways, it wouldn't surprise me whether they really do want him out, just because they want somebody in front like Obama, who Obama expanded 2 wars to 7, and he was the deporter in chief. He did a whole lot of stuff while he was being very cool and being on Ellen DeGeneres' show and all that kind of thing. He dropped 100,000 bombs on people, in black and brown people overseas. Speaking of Black Lives Matter, that means that we should be anti-imperialist and anti-war. So Obama was able to fool people into thinking he was just a very humble guy, and you hear lots of people saying, God, I wish we had Obama back, and all this sort of thing. And meanwhile, he was doing all those awful things behind the scene, droning families and children, killing them. The list goes on. So he did all sorts of awful things while he was in office, while he was looking all cool and groovy and appearing on talk shows and dancing and all of that kind of thing. So Trump is very awkward, and he's sort of a lumbering figure who has trouble kind of formulating sentences, and very much in some ways a different kind of cognitively impaired person, like Biden is, but different. They want somebody who can sell things, and look like they're sort of a friend of all people or whatever, and that's not Trump. And so this is sort of, I wouldn't be surprised if the timing of this with John Bolton. I know that John Bolton, he's a liar, and he's probably looking for another in. He might end up being paid for sort of stating some things that aren't necessarily true, like about Donald Trump, like this implication that he's sort of asked President Xi in China for help in re-election. You would wonder if the national security state, not really wanting Trump to win this next election because they want a smooth operator, and that's not him, that they might throw a few coins to John Bolton to add in some things that will make it worse for Trump, and that's something that I wouldn't be surprised might happen. These are all really, really dodgy characters now. They've always been dodgy, but it's just one big kleptocracy, and the people are irrelevant. It's like a kind of a Game of Thrones, really, in a way, that they've got going there at the White House and also in Congress. This whole Russiagate thing, which pretty much most of it was untrue, and it's disgusting. There were so many things they could have gotten Donald Trump on, and they chose something that wasn't true. And now I imagine, and this is the point I want to make, I imagine that the next 4 years, if he gets in, which is not so assured now. I thought that it might be the case that he would easily get in because there's such a poor candidate, Joe Biden, opposing him. And let's face it, both parties are just a horror story. They're war parties, and they don't care about the public. But with such a poor candidate as Joe Biden, I thought that it was a shoo-in, that Donald Trump was going to get in. But because Donald Trump has messed up this COVID pandemic so badly, and it has not even there's about a third of the people haven't even received the $1,200 pitiful dollars to help them get by, and now there's probably 30 million people out of work. It's like Great Depression era type unemployment, all of that. They will look to Donald Trump as the problem, a lot of those people, and so it may be the case that his some of his base aren't so on board with him anymore, and he may even lose, depending, of course, on how well the election is fiddled with, the general election, because there's so many ways you can fiddle with it, so it depends how well set up either side, the Democrats or the Republicans, how well set up they are to actually, do voter suppression and all the different things they do, remote hacking of voting machines and all the various things that are done every election. They should have international oversight, but they don't. And here they are pointing the finger at everybody else. So I think that it's going to be a Chinagate now if he gets in. It's going to be a Chinagate in relation to Trump for the next 4 years. And Rachel Maddow will be rubbing her hands together because that was Russiagate was her bread and butter. All of that invention and drama. I mean, she did an amazing sort of show every night with the drama and now she can do it about China, and it'll be a dual benefit there, because the national security state wants a vilification of China, because they want a Cold War with China, and that's happening as we speak, and possibly even invading China at some point, because China is an economic threat to the US, and they do not want anybody. Capitalism is fine as long as the US is reigning supreme. It's not okay. The competition is not okay if somebody else is actually surpassing them, which China is doing. As John Pilger did a documentary 2 or 3 years ago now, The Coming War on China.
The world is being primed to regard China as a new enemy. The great power game is called perpetual war.
Our first president, George Washington, said, if you want peace, prepare for war.
Where are we going to stop this process before it starts a war?
The aim of this film is to break a silence, and nuclear war is no longer unthinkable. The equivalent of one Hiroshima bomb was exploded in these islands every day for 12 years.
They're not trying to run the world. They want to keep America from dominating.
We need an enemy for all this money, and China's the perfect enemy.
United States scientists conducted human radiation experiments to study how human beings absorb radiation.
There's really nothing more terrifying than this.
The Chinese, 2,000 years ago, built the Great Wall to keep the barbarians out, not to invade them.
As we look at China on the map, we can see that China is the basic cause of all of our troubles in Asia.
China, they want to dominate a huge chunk of the planet.
It is time to show the whole world that America is back.
I pity a country that would come up against us. We get better and better and better.
He forecast that a few years ago, and it's definitely in progress. You can see by the way all the Murdoch media and just the mainstream media in general is manufacturing consent as we speak every single day. Sky News here in Australia, that's owned by Murdoch, is just appalling. The amount of, they're so much like Fox News now. They were sort of holding back on this sort of to some extent with being exactly like Fox News, but now you look at the videos that they put out, so-called news, and it's either rabidly anti-minority groups, it's putting down the Black Lives Matter movement, it's anti-trans, it's rabidly anti-China propaganda, and before that it was anti-Russian propaganda. It's just like a switch, these mainstream media. You couldn't hope for a more obedient mainstream media to the national security state, and that includes the propaganda from Twitter, from Facebook, from Google. All those different, social media platforms are just propaganda arms of the national security state as well. So anyway, I expect that the switch will be flicked with the corporate-owned media, and they'll now start saying that if Trump is re-elected, that it will be because of the help and the interference of the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, because it's very important to let people know that communism, the red baiting, that communism is something to be very, very afraid of, even though the Chinese government has managed to pull hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in the last decades. But somehow we're supposed to be very, very afraid of China, even though the US is meddling and has been meddling in 50-plus countries, overthrowing them since World War II. So everybody else, point the finger at every other country, but let's not, nobody look at us. Nobody look at US empire and their 1,000 bases around the world and how they've encircled Russia and how they've encircled China, how they constantly threaten countries, how they've got crippling economic sanctions on Venezuela and have managed to kill 40,000 people since 2017, how they've helped with the overthrowing the Bolivian government and have helped install both Juan Guaido in Venezuela and Jean Anez in Bolivia. They're constantly meddling. Yes, but we've got to be afraid of everybody else but the main culprit of the purveyor of most of the violence in the world, which Martin Luther King Jr. said back in the 60s. I mean, sometimes I look at what they were doing in the 60s and I think, is it any wonder it's just the absolutely appalling, insatiable monster that it is, the imperialist monster that it is. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. I just read that a BBC, and yes, I know that's corporate media, but I just happened to look through that to see what they were saying, and it's looking very much like we're going to have 4 years of anti-Chinese propaganda, and that the Chinese help Trump get into office, if he gets into office, of course. So that's all wonderful. I was sick and tired of the whole Russiagate thing, and now we've got Chinagate to look forward to for the next 4 years. Anyway, so that's the shit show that is the United States. Anyway, so thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vigo. Till next time. Bye for now.